Welcome to Sportsworld. We're in South Africa for cricket's first ever World 2020. Is it the future of the game or a made-for-TV gimmick? We look at the pros and cons of 2020. South Africa united. Can black cricket survive in the modern game? We meet the man behind South Africa's other big sporting event. Danny Jordan talks to us about the 2010 World Cup. But first to 2020, a form of the game that's caused controversy and excitement in equal measure. The critics said that such a short version of the game just wasn't cricket, but for the fans, well, they've taken to it in huge numbers, prompting this inaugural World 2020. 2020, for some it brings cricket into the 21st century, for others it threatens the very future of the game. But the message coming out of this inaugural World Cup is that it's here to stay.
It's exciting. I think the atmosphere of the grounds is awesome, and I think the thing as a player is you always want to introduce new people to the game, you know, and to see the game growing. And I think 2020 will allow that. It'll allow new faces, new fans, and then they can develop into the one day and the test formats also once they learn about the game. So for me, that's always encouraging.
I think the key appeal is the time, but also the pace at which the cricket is played. We threw everything at it from the start. 4 years ago when this launched, we weren't sure how it was going to kick off. So all the bells and whistles we threw at it. And through research over the last couple of years, we've understood that it's actually the cricket that is the attraction. It's, you know, the other stuff on the side is great, and it helps with the vibe and the pumping up the energy. But ultimately, it's the cricket that everybody's happy with.
England has been heralded as the birthplace of 2020, but in fact a series known as Pro20 began in South Africa back in 2000. Perhaps not surprisingly, considering the fast-paced nature of the game, it was the brainchild of a TV executive.
So we brainstormed together and we thought 30 overs, we thought 25 overs, and eventually we settled on 20 overs. Now, it wasn't great, it wasn't a sellout, but it was also not a flop. And we realized then, with about 4,500 to 5,000 people being there, that there was something in this product as a first ever that had legs potentially. But the real catalyst came a year later when we moved it to Newlands. It was amazing because we sold out Newlands. There were something like 16,000 people who had bought tickets. It was a complete sellout, plus obviously the people who had season tickets. So it was a complete sellout. And we realized then that we were onto something very interesting. What effectively was our idea, a couple of years later, the English Cricket Board had the foresight to say, there's something that we see that's good, let's tweak it, let's build on it, and let's make it something fantastic.
So 7 years later, South Africa finds itself the venue for the inaugural World 2020. 27 matches in 13 days, played in 3 cities. So lots of travelling, lots of cricket, meaning lots of work for the man charged with making the tournament run smoothly. But can this event capture the imagination in a way that the Cricket World Cup in the Caribbean failed to do?
I suppose the key lesson learnt would be the ticket pricing, understanding not to outprice your market, your own local market, and make sure that you address those concerns, and that it's affordable to your local public as well. Duration was another thing, 14 days total tournament time. And keeping the South African feel, I think looking, not I suppose, choking the local flair of the West Indies and the local people, and keeping it a South African feel and a South African vibe. So I think across probably those 3 are the key issues that we ended up addressing.
But arguably the biggest obstacle facing the World 2020 comes in the shape of an oval ball. This is rugby country, and with that other World Cup taking place in France, the fans of Australia, England, New Zealand, Scotland and South Africa may find themselves having to make some tough choices.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a problem, but I think rugby's going to win, to be honest.
I really think that it would be a lot better if you can move the games, because obviously we're all huge athletic and sport fans. We'd love to watch the cricket and watch the rugby.
In an attempt to woo the fans, 2020 has got its own version of football's penalty shootout, the bowl-off. But the real test will be whether it can establish itself as a serious form of the game alongside Test and one-day cricket. Now, the World 2020 is being seen as crucial to repair the damaged reputation of the game's governing body, the ICC. They were hugely criticised for their organisation of the 50-over World Cup held in the West Indies earlier this year. But the 2020, well, that's a whole new ballgame.
Well, it just shows you that, you know, maybe some cricket connoisseurs, and myself included, weren't that enamoured about the 2020 format, but it's there to stay. People love it, and they're going to turn out for everything.
Does the ICC have different aims with this tournament than it did for the World Cup in the West Indies?
Well, I suppose from an event perspective, not really. Our goal is to put on a world-class event, enjoyed by the players, enjoyed by the fans and the spectators and fans and viewers around the world. But I think the format lends itself to a slightly different atmosphere. I think you know there's no caution, there's no room for caution as far as playing is concerned. So you'll probably see things that you've never seen before as far as batting, fielding, bowling. So I think that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to attract a new audience, you know, a younger set maybe, to the game, and hopefully they'll stay on and then find out that cricket's actually quite a good game to watch no matter the format.
And also, this format is something that you could possibly use to market the game in territories that currently don't really have a culture of cricket, like the United States, Europe, East Asia.
Very much so. I think probably twofold. To do that, to appeal to non-traditional cricket markets who don't have any preconceived ideas about what cricket should look like. You know, from a club perspective, club cricket is dying, and around the world now, a 2020 format, if it's given any kind of legitimacy, people will see this is actually quite a good thing to play on a Friday evening or whatever, and stay in the game for much longer.
Well, ever since the end of apartheid in 1994, the issue of black participation in sport has been high on the agenda. Now, cricket has always been seen as a white sport, but black cricket has more of a history than you might imagine. Ever since the end of apartheid, South Africa's cricket team, like South African society, has tried to be truly representative. The process has had its problems as well as successes, most notably Mackay Ntini. In fact, he's the latest in a long line of black African cricketers that stretches back to the 1850s. Andre Odendaal has watched the development of black cricket from both sides of the fence. An Afrikaner, he was the first white first-class player to line up against black cricketers.
Under apartheid, with the exclusion of people from official life, people assumed that this was natural, that black people played soccer, that whites played rugby and cricket. But in fact, from the 1860s onwards, there was a tradition of mission school, Western educated people in the mission schools getting a Victorian education, and obviously cricket was central to all that.
Professor Odendaal began playing in the 1970s, a particularly tough period for black cricket. Many members of the freedom struggle associated the game with the white establishment. Out of this period came Khaya Majola, a talented batsman and a member of the non-racial South African Cricket Board of Control. He spread the gospel of cricket in the black townships. Khaya died in 2000, but his brother continues to work for his dream of non-racial cricket.
Khaya was a gifted player. Khaya could have played with any player at the time and could have himself represented the country, but unfortunately was denied that right of representing his country. And therefore he wanted to put back into the country and show the world that there's a lot of other black talented cricketers that, if given opportunities, they can represent this country. So that was Khaya's passion.
However, 7 years after his death, the most famous symbol of township cricket finds itself in a sorry state. Soweto Cricket Club has hosted teams from all over the world, yet today the club is struggling to stay afloat.
I think more can be done, especially in terms of promoting the game within the townships. More can be done if they could put more of their resources into making the point that cricket becomes one of the major sports within the schooling systems, especially the black schooling system. Then that will actually make it more easier. And that means getting more guys to coach cricket within the schools, making it one of the sports, the main sports in the schools. Then it makes it eventually easier for us for everything to work out for us.
Today, South Africa uses a quota policy to get more young black and coloured players into the team. It's a policy that's been criticised by white South African-born players like Kevin Peterson, who claim they've been forced away as a consequence. But the player who most benefited from Peterson's departure says it was his ability and not his colour that made the difference.
He's been unfair to South Africa because he learned all his cricket over in South Africa, and he's just been a few years in England now. He calls himself an English. But I think there was a whole controversial thing behind that, because at that particular time I don't think Kevin was a batsman who could bowl. He was a bowler who could bat, and only when he went to England he worked on his batting and became one of the top players.
So while the controversy of quotas in the national team continues, maybe it's the grassroots level that should receive more support if black cricket in South Africa is to really have a future. Well, of course, you can keep up to date with all the latest sports news. Just head on to our website. That's aljazeera.net/English. But stay with us, because still to come on Sportsworld, we meet the man behind South Africa's other big sporting event. Danny Jordan talks to us about the 2010 World Cup.